Few game series have as much history as Like a Dragon. From the 9 mainline entries to spin-offs, side games, and even multiple genres, the series has evolved from a small beat-em-up crime game to a sprawling saga that has defined the legacy of its developer, RGG Studios. One of those spin-offs is Like a Dragon Ishin, which tells the story of Sakamoto Ryoma, a low-level samurai who over the course of his 30-odd-year life would change the history of Japan forever. In retelling this history, RGG has not only looked into the history of their country, but into their own legacy. Instead of looking into the future, Like a Dragon Ishin looks to the past to take the player on a journey that uses their knowledge of both RGG's past games as well as historical context to greatly enhance the experience. The setup to the story is probably one you've heard before. After returning home after a year of studying swordsmanship, Sakamoto Ryoma returns to where he grew up, joining his father and brother's cause to free the locals from the tyrannical rule of the Bufuku government. After his father is murdered, Ryoma leaves his home in search of the killer, taking him on a journey that will alter Japan's history forever. After arriving in the game's main city, Kyo, the game truly begins, and Ryoma and the player are introduced to a world from a different time. For the player, that time is 2014. Like a Dragon Ishin was originally released in 2014, but only in Japan. The version available in the United States is a remake, but maintains a lot of the design philosophy from before Ubisoft took over the open world formula. If you've played an RGG game before, you know what to expect from Kyo. It's small, dense, and lively, trading in the expanse of most games for a tighter setting that emphasizes detail. From the various NPCs gathering around the shops to drunk people passing out if you bump into them, the world feels alive despite limited interactivity, due to the level of detail for both the visuals and audio of the world. The major way that Ryoma can interact with those around him is old school RGG combat, with a slight twist. The beat-em-up style returns, this time with 4 unique playstyles: Brawler, Swordsman, Gunman, and Wild Dancer. Brawler is the old school RGG combat, focused on fists and environmental weapons. Swordsman uses slow, deliberate strikes with an emphasis on blocking and parrying. Gunman is fairly self-explanatory, using special ammo to deal extra damage and status effects. And lastly, Wild Dancer sees Ryo wield a gun and sword in each hand, with big sweeping strikes that are great for crowd control. Arguably, the best decision the game makes is giving access to every style within the first chapter, allowing the player to experiment and get comfortable with the different styles very early on. Like in previous games in the series, the combat is imprecise, but with an increased crunch due to the emphasis on weapons in this one. Slashing someone with a sword or blasting a group of enemies with a gun never feels old, even after dozens of hours. One reason for that is the game's reliance on scrappy fights means the player has to improvise their way out of many difficult encounters, using every tool at their disposal instead of relying on button precision. One of the new tools available in this one is the troop system. Early in the main story, Ryoma joins a group known as the Shinsengumi, a band of samurai who impose the shogunate's rule in Kyo. Not only does he join, but he's made captain right away, giving him control over Shinsengumi troops. In practice, these troops are used as power-ups, and squad the troops can be assigned to each of the 4 different fighting styles. They give different perks such as increased defense, special attacks, and healing. When the player is given access to the troops, they're also given access to the Bandit side campaign, which sees Ryoma take on various missions to deal with the local outlaws. The missions are pretty basic, usually just a couple rooms with a boss at the end, but combat is so much fun and the levels contain so much loot that completing them does feel worth it. The other main piece of side content available within Like a Dragon Ishin is Another Life. This sees Ryoma take over the farm owned by the parents of a girl named Haruka, whose name I swear I've heard before. Like Sujimon and the cabaret management minigames before, RGG put an entire game from a different genre within this one, this time choosing Life Sim. Ryoma has access to the basic mechanics that these games offer, notably farming, fishing, and cooking. Side note, but the song that plays during cooking is a straight banger. Both Another Life and Troop Management are the 2 main pieces of side content, but they're not the only ones. Not only that, but they interact with the rest of the side content in some very interesting ways. For example, the loot that Ryoma can acquire during the bandit raids can be used to upgrade equipment, just as new troops can be recruited during battles around the city. Resources gathered during Another Life can be used to further Ryoma's relationships with various individuals around the city, including a boy who loves vegetables or a fisherman who can't, well, fish. Everything the player does feels like it interacts with something else in the world, and most of the time it's up to the player to figure that out, engaging with the systems put forth instead of relying on an overly wordy quest log. The city is also full of the typical Like a Dragon side stories and minigames, both of which are tailored to fit the time period the game takes place in. While some are just conversations to set up the previously mentioned relationships, and others are just combat encounters, plenty others are full of character, allowing the game to highlight a part of the world that it's unable to during the main campaign. One personal highlight is when Ryoma is recruited to help a teacher show his students how to use a globe, because the teacher is unable to do so himself. When Ryoma is not helping out the locals, he can partake in a bunch of activities that will be familiar to anyone who's played one of these games before. Karaoke, various gambling games, and even an arena are all available in the early chapters of the game. Ryoma can bet on chicken races, or even perform a traditional rendition of Bakumatai. While simple in their design, the minigames add so much to the overall world design because they highlight what makes RGG open worlds different from others. Most open world games are large play spaces designed to be conquered. Kyo, like Kamurocho before it, is a small play space designed to be lived in. Visiting restaurants, playing the minigames, these mechanics aren't there to eat away at a player's time, although they do that. They're in there to allow the player to almost simulate the life of someone living in this time period. Ryoma, while an important figure that I'll get to in a little bit, isn't in Kyo to control or liberate it, but to live. And the interactivity given to the player, maybe besides the combat, is designed to almost be a simulation of the day-to-day of someone living in this time period. But all of this is also reflective of an earlier time period of game design, and reflects different design principles than what has become the norm nowadays. The emphasis on economical mechanics and significantly tighter scope, this isn't a game with modern sensibilities, it's a game about a different time period, from a different time period. And speaking of a different time period, it's probably time to address Sakamoto Ryoma directly, and what he's doing in Kyo at this time. Ryoma's search for his father's killer is what lands him in Kyo, using the alias of Saito Hajime. Despite his ties to the Loyalists, who are those aligned with the Emperor of Japan, Ryoma swears allegiance to the Shinsengumi, whose job it is to uphold the tyrannical rule of the Bafuku government, and becomes a captain after an impressive tryout. As his search deepens, he's thrust deeper into the political upheaval taking place in Japan, and his choices will help determine the future of the country, just as the real Sakamoto Ryoma did centuries ago. This next section is going to discuss some of the real history that Like a Dragon Ishin pulls influence from, so it will contain spoilers for the first roughly half of the game. If you've never played an RGG game before, it's a perfect place to start. And if you're familiar with the series but missed this one like I did, your familiarity with the series will enhance your experience. With that out of the way, let's finally talk about Sakamoto Ryoma. According to Britannica, Sakamoto Ryoma was born in 1836 and was a pivotal figure in the Meiji Restoration. Through his skills as a swordsman, he was able to unite the two major anti-shogunate factions, the Setsuna and the Choshu, into a major alliance that led to the Meiji Restoration, which not only gave Japan's rule back to the emperor, but also led to the modernization of Japan over the Meiji period, which ran from 1868 to 1912. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I'm no historian, especially when it comes to Japan, but it becomes apparent early on that the Sakamoto Ryoma that the player controls does not follow the same path as the one in our history books. For starters, Ryoma never joined the Shinsengumi. He was openly loyalist, putting him in direct opposition to the group, him joining is pure fiction. And about the halfway point of the game, it's revealed that there's another man using the name Sakamoto Ryoma, pulling strings behind the scenes to fan the flames of war between the shogunate and the loyalists. This Ryoma ends up playing the role of the antagonist of the game, but what's interesting is that he ends up following a lot of the main events of the real Sakamoto Ryoma, although nefariously. For example, he teams up with the man by the name of Katsu Kaishu, the man responsible for developing Japan's navy. Also, according to Britannica, Ryoma and Kaishu were allies in real history, but in the game, he's replaced by the other Ryoma. The player's campaign through Ishin more closely follows the story of Saito Hajime, at least superficially. Hajime was the real-life 3rd Division captain within the Shinsengumi, and according to the Samurai Archives, Saito was also an alias he took on after participating in an assassination. From there, the main story ends up weaving these two men together, with Ryoma enacting a lot of his real-life legacy while in the position that the real Hajime held. Ryoma does unite the Setsuna and Choshu, but instead of an intentional move to unite the Loyalists and overthrow the Bafuku, Ryoma gets hammered with the heads of each of the clans and is able to get through to them in a fit of grief. By playing with history in this way, Like a Dragon Ishin both allows itself to craft its own narrative, free from the constraints of following history, and to play with the audience's expectations of what is happening in the main story. The more the player is familiar with this time period, the more the game is able to mess with them with the liberties that it takes. The alteration of history isn't just to mess with players, it's to establish who Ryoma is within the world of Like a Dragon. Through using the likeness of Kiryu Kazuma, the game is able to make a statement about Ryoma's influence during his own time period. Both men joined organizations due to the influences of their father figures, Both men are forced to confront complex political unrest happening in the towns that they call home, and both overcome this unrest not through cunning, but by sheer force of will while standing up for something bigger than themselves. While obviously the Ryoma in-game differs from the real one historically in many significant ways, the game really isn't about who Ryoma was during the real-life Meiji Restoration, but instead a retelling of the legacy of Ryoma, using the framework of a Like a Dragon game to tell its tale. In the same way the game relies on the player's expectations of real history, it does the same with the history of the Like a Dragon series. As mentioned, Ryoma is modeled on longtime series protagonist Kazuma Kiryu, a character who is a legend in his own time. The two men are linked in more than just appearance and voice, with their impact on the respective time periods mirroring each other. The legend of Sakamoto Ryoma is carried by the dragon of Dojima. Where Kiryu managed to alter the course of Kamurocho and the Tojo clan, Ryoma altered the history of Japan forever. He's not the only one who is informed by a Like a Dragon character, as most of the main cast are modeled after iconic characters from throughout the series, many of whom play with the historical figure that it's being depicted. While I could find little concrete evidence of Okita Soji's personality, it appears that he was a fiercely dedicated swordsman who mastered his own technique, and was kind to others while maintaining discipline with his own students. There was no mention of the mad dog that stands in his shoes throughout Ishin. Replacing real people with iconic Like a Dragon characters allows the game to further mess with the story of the Shinsengumi, being able to divert history not with contrived plot devices that rear their heads randomly, but instead with character-driven storytelling. It's honestly a wild approach that I really respect, as it allows the creators to take the bones of history and layer it with muscle of their own creation. Ishin isn't a game about real history, it's a retelling of a legacy, and the game declares this by bringing characters from its own legacy to inform the real history it aims to depict. This is what makes Like a Dragon Ishin feel so special. By placing real history within the lens of the long-running Like a Dragon series, the game is able to craft its own legend of a real-life historical figure. In the same way that the main series is able to contextualize modern Japan within a melodramatic crime thriller, Ishin takes the chaotic political era of the Meiji Restoration and brings it down to the personal level, allowing strong, memorable personalities to take those like me, who is uninitiated with this period of Japan's history, and introduce it to us in a way that'll stick with me for a long time. But it wasn't just real history that the game looked back at, and its quote-unquote dated game design forced me to engage with the game in a very specific way, which most modern games would avoid doing. Ishin is a must-play, not because it's a perfect game, but because it takes what came before and molds it into something that feels both informed and inspired. The medium of video games feels like it's constantly rushing forward, so it was nice to spend time with the title that decided to look back on what came before in both real history and in game design, and to create something truly unique with that. So looking back at Legacy, Ishin was able to craft its own, and I'm so grateful to have played it.